What's up, it's Endymion. Today there seems to be some pretty negative news surrounding Warhammer, specifically Space Marine 2, at least in the beginning here. Players are upset that the game is not delivering what they believe is enough to keep the game alive for years to come. Beyond this, there's an update on female Custodes that paints a rather bleak picture for 2025 and much more. Firstly, Space Marine 2 is a smash success. It has sold well over 5 million copies at this point, and has cemented itself as one of, if not the best-selling Saber interactive games of all time. I consider Space Marine 2 to be one of the best games I played last year, and a game I jump back into from time to time as new content drops. The thing about Space Marine 2, however, is that its seasonal structure is not quite the same as, say, Fortnite or even Marvel Rivals. In those games, there's entire new seasons with a clear, distinct beginning and end time, with cosmetics and character skin unlocks tied to battle passes that players unlock as they play. Beyond the battle pass, especially in Fortnite's case, you'll have plenty of skins and collaborations coming to the game for various amounts of money. These skins are usually tied to whatever the theme is at the time, like as of the making of this video. Fortnite is in a Japan-themed season, so Batman and Darth Vader both got new skins, but as ninjas and samurais, for example. It's stuff like that. It keeps things dynamic and having reasons for players to want to return. In Space Marine 2's case, it's not exactly the same. The game has seasons, sure, but it isn't exactly like Fortnite's. Instead, all content is available no matter what. There's no battle pass to grind per se, but instead you level up your characters and upgrade your weapons and such along paths depending on the weapons that you're using. While not like Fortnite, Space Marine is and should be considered a live service game, just of course in a different way. Unlike say Destiny 2, which usually has one big content drop and then nothing for a while, Space Marine, like Saber's previous game World War Z, has constant smaller updates that drip feed the player for engagement. Whether you prefer Fortnite or Space Marine's way of doing things, I think there's positives and negatives in both. I think erasing content like Fortnite does per season does create FOMO, or fear of missing out, which obviously makes people no-life the game to get the things they want before they're gone for good. But if a new player were to join Fortnite right now, so to say, there would be hundreds, if not thousands of skins that they have no access to. Never mind the sprays or the pickaxe variants and gliders, they would be behind, so to speak, compared to what other players have gathered over time. Whereas in Space Marine's case, whether you play it right now or in a year, everything is available to you regardless. The operations won't mysteriously disappear, nor will the enemy types. These things will remain. Which you could then make the argument, if you wait a year or more to play a game like Space Marine 2, you would technically get a better game for likely cheaper, and you would be right. Regardless, based on the Steam reviews, it seems like players are angry with Saber and Games Workshop because Space Marine 2 is, for lack of a better term, out of date when it comes to how this game exists and operates against other live service offerings. Seeing here, Space Marine 2 as a whole has very positive reviews on Steam, which is to be expected. However, if you go into its subcategories like weapon packs or armored cosmetic packs, this then tells a different story. Firstly, look at the Ultramarines pack, clearly stating it has a mostly negative rating from players themselves. As you click inside, you'll find people who say things like this. This DLC only gives you the ability to then unlock these cosmetics in-game. It does not immediately unlock these, which they failed to make this explicitly clear. Poor business practice. Again, this is where the Fortnite expectations when it comes to microtransactions comes into play. Because obviously in Fortnite, you just pay for something and then you have it. There's no need to do a challenge or level up to then gain access to it. I do agree that paying for a cosmetic pack like this should not be then placed behind a wall, so to speak, in-game if you've already paid for it. That actually seems very bizarre of Saber to do. If you buy the pack, you should just have access to it. It's not the only case either. Here we have the Chosen DLC, which also has a mixed reception, as you can see here. Going into the reviews, as one player states, gun skins are likely to apply to all weapons, but not really. I don't really use them that much because they only apply to one bad performance bolt rifle. And I could keep showing you these negative reviews, but I think you get the point. Again, this is a problem, because players' expectations have been increased thanks to games like Fortnite yet again and others like them. In Fortnite, when you get a weapon skin from either the Battle Pass or a bundle, that skin is then applied to every conceivable weapon in-game. You could argue that Space Marine 2 skins are more intricately designed and change the weapons models in some way, which you would be right. But yet again, I think what's happening here is that there are expectations of what players want versus what Saber is actually delivering. And these two things are clearly at odds with one another because Space Marine does not operate like a traditional live service game, for better and for worse in many's eyes. Do I think Space Marine 2 could benefit from a battle pass per se? I would say mostly yes, but the problem with Space Marine right now is that there simply isn't enough operations to grind in a realistic sense before players could get bored. In terms of its multiplayer, while decent at times, it feels very old school in both good and bad ways as well. On the one hand, you don't have supers per se like Marvel Rivals or Overwatch or Destiny. Each class is instead defined mostly by a single ability that is wholly unique to them, or weapons in some cases like Assault with the big hammer or Bulwark using the sword and shield combo. There's no kill streaks either like in say Call of Duty, and of course Space Marine doesn't have a mode like Battle Royale, which is wildly popular as we all know. Don't get me wrong, what's on offer here with Space Marine is great still, but comparing it to say its competition in some ways is clearly not fair. Then again, the argument could be made that Space Marine 2 is not competing with Fortnite, Call of Duty, or Apex anyways, since most of these games' multiplayer offerings are free to play, outside of COD's traditional 6v6 modes included in the yearly releases, and I guess the single-player campaigns too. As we know, Space Marine 2 is not free to play. It's a fully priced premium product with a full campaign and everything else. But then we need to realize that eventually Space Marine will start to bleed players likely, if it hasn't already. Not because it isn't good or worth your money, but people's attentions, like always, eventually shift to other things in due time. Would it then reach a point where Focus Interactive, Games Workshop, and Saber might release a free-to-play version of Space Marine at some point too? Maybe the campaign won't be included, but the operations and multiplayer maps are instead. I think if Space Marine eventually did go free to play, it could have some great positives with some obvious negative setbacks as well. Firstly, the game's population would rightfully explode in numbers, leading to more engagement, players, and of course, potential sales. On the negative side, Space Marine's core drip feeding structure would then need to change. There would have to be more cosmetic packs and unique skins available in a more Fortnite-like way to make up for the lack of selling a premium product as entry. I guess my question in all of this, since I found it interesting enough to talk about here, is would you be open to the prospect of Space Marine 2 going free to play at some point? And if so, why? And if not even, why as well? Would it kill the game if Saber opened the gates to all or not? Would it feel like a betrayal since you paid premium prices to play it, but again, the free players wouldn't have access to the campaign, but even then, is that enough? Do you believe that Space Marine 2 as an overall product is perfect just the way that it is, or do you agree with the Steam reviews and feedback that the game is to some degree out of date, so to speak? Again, to remind people, Space Marine 2 is very obviously similar to World War Z's model, which was also made by Saber. They too released drip-fed content over time as things improved, new guns, skins, enemies, modes, maps, all of it. The game, when it came out, versus the game it has become, are two very different experiences. But I will play devil's advocate here, where I think I am getting tired of games releasing less content-rich than they will be in a few years' time. And it often makes me wonder, why buy some games at all during release if I can just wait a year or two for the inevitable definitive edition that'll objectively be far superior with much better value? But then if we all waited, these games and studios would die too, so it's a really perplexing problem. IGN of course spoke to Tim Willits, the chief creative officer of Saber and Space Marine 2, who commented way back in September 2024 on why Saber does things the way that they do. Tim says at one point in the interview, One of the reasons why we got 25 million people in World War Z is because every time we release a new DLC pack or a free class and we had a sale, people buy it. We literally see a spike, Will it said. We put out a video promoting a new character pack. We see a spike in sales, so it just drives attention and drives awareness. There's always one guy that says, guys, come on, there's new stuff coming up, and then, okay, so 3 other people are like, it's only $5, let's buy it. And so you get this kind of group FOMO thing going on that really helps, and we had so much success with that model, that's what we'll do. So I guess ultimately, the reason why Saber is successful is because they're doing their own model that works uniquely for them. Granted, Space Marine 2 is not $5 to buy right now, well, as of the making of this video anyway. Although I bet in a few years' time it will be slashed in half price-wise, and then it will lead to a resurgence of players for sure. But maybe Space Marine 2's success and profits come from the fact that it's nothing like Fortnite, but an interesting story regardless that I think we all needed to talk about. While players to some degree are angry at Space Marine 2, claiming that they are tired and sick of the slow drip-fed content or the cosmetics not really being as advertised, others clearly are enjoying it. Will the game survive for years like World War Z has, or will it falter? Let me know what you think about all of this. And there's no wrong answer here either, by the way. It's just simply whatever you think. Now, let's move on to this Custodes story update. From Fandom Pulse, alleged Games Workshop email reveals company doubling down on female Adeptus Custodes with planned miniatures for Horus Heresy 3.0. So in case you don't know, to quickly catch you up, there was an Ultimate Guidebook that came out at the end of October 2024. This book detailed a bunch of lore bits about the universe of Warhammer. Within this book, they confirmed that Adeptus Custodes are being referred to with male pronouns over that of gender-neutral or female pronouns as seen here, where Wokehammer Els on Twitter literally points at it and took a screenshot. Also here, you can see Wokehammer Els pointing directly at the word brotherhood to describe how the Custodes are defined as a group. They're a brotherhood, as in men, not women. This all made everybody celebrate, rightfully so, because it made people believe that Games Workshop was actually listening to people. That was until Gav Thorpe, one of the writers of this Ultimate Guide, confirmed via Blue Sky that female Adeptus Custodes were in fact still very much a thing despite what the book was saying. He claimed that the book was written prior to the existence of female Custodes, and that's why they weren't mentioned or confirmed. Yet the book was obviously sold as an official guide, yet its own writer confirms that this so-called Ultimate Guide is in fact full of misinformation. I mean, clearly it is. None of this has gone over well at all, because it just made people angry and upset that Gav Thorpe and Games Workshop were basically selling misinformation pretty much. Now this has brought us to the next part of this ongoing saga of female Custodes. This brings us to a user named Crypta Miniatures, who claims to have insider information on all of this. I cannot confirm 100% if they're telling the truth, so grain of salt and all of that. They said, do you know they released a show about it? They have an entire release coming with female Custodes next year for Horus Heresy 3.0 even. The show in question is The Tithes, by the way, but the bombshell that the 3.0 version of Horus Heresy would be rewriting the lore, that had people raise an eyebrow. Obviously, people would ask for more info. Crypta would then reply, just for your information, female Stodes aren't going away at all. In fact, Games Workshop is going to be doubling down after 3.0 releases of Horus Heresy with more Custodes updates and moving everything to plastic from resin. Custodes 3.0 Tribune is rumored to have female head options per accidental email. This, of course, caused people to go, wait, what email are you speaking of? And they are now making female Custodes miniatures a thing going forward. Crypta would not reveal the full email, which to me, that felt very weird to not do. But according to them, this email leaks well over 30 different merchandise items that are coming in 2025. In my opinion, if Crypta wanted their word to become bond, they would leak the whole email for everybody to see. And if the leaks within the email came to be true in time, it would confirm that they were indeed not lying. The only part of the email that Crypta leaked said this, which is weirdly presented, so I apologize, but it reads, Horus Heresy 3.0 campaign, the introduction of a female Custodes tribune to lead a specialized contingent of the Legion Custodes. It then cuts off at the left here, but then it says the possibility of portraying a Custodes tribune who defies expectations, showing that the Emperor's elite's defenders might be, and then it cuts off again. But according to Crypta, the point here is that Games Workshop would be, according to them, adding new lore to the universe, and retroactively making entire legions of female Custodes canon come June 2025, which is extra weird to make the announcement in that month specifically. Because, in case you forgot, June is Pride Month, and what better time to pander to raise your DEI and ESG numbers than release your projected slop in the month where everybody else is also spewing their garbage too. As for people actually buying the female sets, I guess we'll have to wait and see. I wager it won't be a big seller because ever since they confirmed that female Custodes existed, the base sets of the Custodes have been allegedly gathering dust and failing to sell compared to when they were canonically just men like before. Then again, this ball has been rolling for a while, since Goonhammer.com back in April 2024 released an article where they pretty much stated that any Warhammer fan that was against female Adeptus Custodes was simply fragile and pathetic and should not be considered a part of the fandom. I'll read you a section of their article, but this is pretty much who is wishing for these changes to happen. Goonhammer said about female Custodes, and I quote, "Her name is Custodian Calidus Tarovalia Kesh, our first honest-to-goodness, actual factual female member of the Custodian Guard in a Games Workshop publication." That's right folks, they did it, and it effing rocks. After years of hearing there was nothing really stopping them from doing it, and it just not being done anyway, she's here and I want to hear more about her. Because not only do we have our first canon female custodian, she was given her own 2-page short story. This isn't some throwaway paragraph or sentence jammed deep into a timeline. Here, Kesh is given a full spread to show off the intense efficiency of the Golden Host as we follow her on the last stages of her journey aboard an Imperial ship to complete a very unique attempt at winning the Blood Games. And Kesh isn't the only female custodian in the book. Shield Captain Bezera is detailed as a particularly famed member of the Aquilid Shield that leads an entire host of jet bikes and grav vehicles. 4 years ago, a rogue intern dropped a bomb on the fandom with the widely celebrated Warhammer is for everyone message. It was an explicit statement on the direction of their settings. We will continue to diversify the cast of characters we portray through miniatures, art, and storytelling so everyone can find representation and heroes they can relate to. Since then, we've seen models, sculpts, and heroes of all shapes, colors, and creeds find prominent positions in the lore and on the tabletop, slowly tearing down the makeshift gates being kept by prejudice, ignorance, and misogyny that a weak and petulant few hope to keep alive in a desperate attempt not to protect their hobby as they would proclaim, but to protect their own fragility. Of those releases and updates, this is probably the most earth-shattering for them, another pillar collapsing. Just like with each of these releases, this dwindling few have come out again as news has spread, and I have never seen folks go through the 7 stages of grief so rapidly. To them I say, get effed, nerds, it's time to jump on the hype train and expand your worldview or lay down in some grass for a while, end quote. Very interesting how Goonhammer puts it here, claiming that the people who want Warhammer to be like it always has been are in a minority. Yet that minority, according to them, are actually the majority of the fanbase. And they have been supporting the brand for decades. Curious that they would word it this way considering it's obviously not true. Then claiming the move was to protect fragility and not the hobby, that's a lie too. Because how I understand it is the sole reason why people don't want female Custodes is simple, because it's not lore accurate. The same way how women can't become Space Marines due to the process that it involves, it's not necessarily a misogynistic viewpoint, but just people wanting rules and lore to be respected. Had female Space Marines or Custodes existed from the beginning, none of this would really matter. But when you present a concept with clear-cut rules like Warhammer has for years, only to now circle back and be changing it, does that sound like fragility to you, or just disrespect for the lore? I think Goonhammer is clearly ran by activists. It's clear as day from this article alone. It's sad to see, but I mean, they're not the only website or group that speaks and thinks like this. But what I am sick of, more than anything else, are the things I enjoy being changed to adhere to people who clearly don't enjoy things unless it has that political or gender slant to it. But I do think the more you pander to these sorts, the worse your product and your franchises will become. Whereas the whole Space Marine 2 may be dated and how it presents content thing can be debated as whether each side is technically wrong, I do believe there's a stark contrast between what works and doesn't when it comes to this story of Custodes in particular. The ultimatum is what it has always been, to remove the legacy of a franchise and expand it to no longer resemble what it was originally intended to be, both for who it was made for and for what it represented. I fear that we're not past this moronic and self-destructing mantra, and it will only worsen as time goes on. At this point, my channel and the stories that I cover are but a collection of cautionary tales that I do hope in due time last to show the future how not to repeat the mistakes of the past. If the price for your diversity is the well-being and annihilation of the ground you walk on and the walls that protect you, you have but to ask yourself this. Is burning down the house worth its warmth, knowing that come morning, you're going to freeze to death anyway? Would it not be better to find a different path forward that doesn't result in your demise over what's clearly being chosen as the path instead? Women exist in Warhammer. The Sisters of Silence are a great example, and I have no problem with them. But I do feel that what these activists want does nothing but ruin the future for everyone, themselves included. Is a weaker Games Workshop both financially and culturally worth it so that you can simply state that a woman is now in golden armor? Would it not be preferable to create a new faction perhaps equal or somewhat in power to the Custodes that does have females in it instead? But then by doing this, it would require these writers and activists to have original thoughts in their brains. And of course, this is not the case, nor the want, as that would actually require creativity. So instead, it seems the status quo is to simply rehash and rewrite and tear down what was to make way for what no one really desires. A perfect recipe for a delusional fool who knows not what they want nor how to make it, but only knows how to destroy things because their gender studies teacher told them what was bad and they were too stupid to question it. Ultimately, the problem will sort itself out. The almighty God that is capitalism will speak truth and shatter the foundations of these morons, whether they wanted to or not. As I said in a previous video, 2025 is a year of counter-offensives. We need to plant our feet firm and stand tall against the rising tide. They're going to come at us, the activists, the freaks, and the delusional, with everything they have to crush us into compliance. And I implore each and every one of you to always question whatever you see regardless of political angles and think for yourselves. Because the more self-aware and strong-minded you become, the more difficult you will be to control and influence. So call out the bad actors and never take anything at face value. Even keep me accountable, please, as well. I would appreciate that greatly. This virus wishes to kill the hosts, and this year it's going to try its damnedest. And I hope there's enough of us that are clear-minded that will continue to refuse these things. Do not boycott Games Workshop entirely. Space Marine 2 is fine. But when these alleged female Custodes come out, ignore them like you did Dustborn, Concord, and the rest. Boycott the hell out of them and send a message. Never let these companies realize that they're fully in control and that they work for you and not the other way around. Reward what works and reject what doesn't. Only then can things heal. Thank you for watching. Subscribe. Thanks to my supporters. Have a great day.